Hold up, a Sega franchise on Game Boy? Well, actually, no. Not long after this, Puyo Puyo was owned by Sega, sure, but up until 2001, Puyo Pop games were pretty much all developed by Compile. A spin-off of the dungeon-crawling series Sorcery Saga originally, it's a concept that outgrew its own source material and has been named several different things throughout the years. Sega fans might have played a game on one of their 8 or 16-bit consoles called Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Well, technically this is the same thing. SNES owners would get a title called Kirby's Avalanche in 1995 too, which was really just a sprite swap where you'd play against King Dedede and his various minions. Like many falling block puzzlers in basic design, but this has more of a competitive edge to it. There are 2 playfields, one for you and the other for an opponent. The better one player does, the more obstacles are thrown in the way of the other. Generally, the idea in Puyo Puyo, or Puyo Pop, whichever you prefer, is to defeat the opponent by filling the opponent's board with these Puyo, which are round, slime-like creatures that fall from the top of the screen in groups of 2, 3, or 4. For the most part, you'll see them fall in pairs, which can be rotated and flipped as you desire, and as is commonplace with this sort of thing, you can see a preview of the next piece to fall at the top of the screen. You eliminate the Puyo by connecting 4 or more of the same colour together. They don't all have to be in a horizontal or vertical line, as long as they have at least one side touching. They can be any shape you wish. Periodically, and depending on how well or badly you're doing, these unmatchable blobs, these garbage Puyo, will appear. They cannot be removed by matching them, they have to be touching another group that gets removed, then they will pop themselves. The worse you're doing in relation to the other board, the more unmatchables will appear. You get better scores and inflict more hell on the other board should you match simultaneous groups or string together chains of matches that eliminate one after another. When done correctly, falling block puzzle games are basically perfect for this system and have proven to be some real highlights in the original library. They're not super taxing on the system from a control perspective, and it should, in theory, be simple to create a graphics set that isn't hindered by even the monochrome Game Boy. There in fact were entries earlier than this. The original DMG library had Puyo Puyo as a Japanese exclusive in 1994, and even the sequel, Pocket Puyo Puyo 2, towards the end of 1996. Each brought their own new details to the fore, with the sequel allowing you to counter the opponent's chains, and changing up the single-player gauntlet a little bit to make it less linear. This one, the third in the series, adds this idea of a sun Puyo. It looks a bit like a bubble here, which, if successfully popped, can send a whole bunch more garbage onto the other grid. Here, the entirety of the screen is used really economically, maximizing the space and making the most out of the perceived limitations. The story mode works excellently as a difficulty curve, where the opponents increasingly throw more at you by becoming more efficient themselves. You're never hindered by the controls either. They're responsive and speedy, and let you fling these blocks around the board as you wish without ever falling in the wrong place or getting stuck on things. You'll live or die based on your own reactions and decision-making speed, which is how it should be. I'm not sure why this wouldn't be released outside of Japan, as it's one of the best examples of the genre on the Game Boy. Obviously with Tetris it had a heck of a strong rival, and it could have been that fact that hindered a lot of these sorts of games getting a worldwide release. Who knows? Even so, seek out a copy of this if you're at all a fan of this style, as the Game Boy version is just as much fun as any of the home console ones. The colorizations are lovely, but the game can also be played just as easily on the Super Game Boy or on the grayscale consoles, with block colors replaced by different shapes.